with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please follow after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, we have some logistics problems outside with the driveway blocked, so we may have a few stragglers here for the next minute or two. So now we have the roll call, and we'll begin with Renee Westelusk is online or on virtual. Renee Westelusk.
Yes, here.
Okay, and West Katzenstein.
Here.
Lyle Fisher.
I'm here.
Judy Decker.
Here.
Camille informed me that she might have a conflict late this afternoon. She might not make it. It looks like she's not made it. Tim Carroll, absent at this point. And Regina Troglin, and she informed me that she might be late because she had another meeting on a board that she's also on that overlapped with this and may run late. So she's absent at this point. And David Janis, that's myself. With 5, we have a quorum. Non-voting members, Don Zadiba.
Present.
Tom Bukowskis.
Present.
John Kersey, and he informed me he's in Hawaii on business, a likely story. Yep. He's in Hawaii for a conference, so he's going to be absent. And Lorelei Oviatt, I don't see Lorelei online either, so she's absent. So with that, we'll begin the agenda with open public comment from the public in the House. Seeing none, do we have any open public comment virtually or online? I see the signal no from Riley. So with that, we've got the next up is approve the June minutes for our PAC meeting. Do we have a motion or comments?
I move for approval.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any comments or discussion? Okay, vote. Renee Westelusk?
Aye.
Okay. West Katzenstein?
Aye.
Lyle Fisher?
Aye.
Judy Decker?
Aye.
Camille Anderson? Not here. Tim Carroll, not here. Regina, not here. Okay, David Janis, approve. So it's 5-0. The minutes are accepted as submitted. Okay, we're down to item number 5, review the ad hoc subcommittee recommended changes to the C&E plan. This overall subject is something we've been working on for a few months here in the PAC, and in the interest of making sure the public is informed, when we sent this out to the full members of the PAC last week for review and prep for this meeting so they could review it, we summarized what we had gone through, and I'll just quickly summarize that for the public. There were 6 items that we had taken into consideration overall, major categories that we had taken into consideration for reviewing this. The first one primarily was the overall PAC committee recommendations for the overall communication and engagement, how the GA should do communication and engagement overall during the GSP implementation phase that were presented to the GA at the July 13th board meeting. And it focused on major items that we, the PAC, recommended. The first were the key focus elements for the GSP implementation phase, the integrated schedule and key fact sheets. Secondly, increase new communication methods, internet, Website, email, select social media were recommended, and traditional means, the more focused on stakeholder-specific and targeted workshops. And the third one overall was a C&E director, function and responsibilities, a communication and engagement director. The second major category overall that we looked at was to go back and review what the individual PAC member comments that we had each submitted in writing at the first meeting at the May 26th, particularly with regarding recommended changes to the plan from a review of recommended changes to the plan from review of other DWR approved plans, and those were thought to be, in some cases, best practices. And you'll recall in that May 26th meeting, there were several PAC members that cited certain sections of other plans as something we may want to emulate in ours. The third major item overall we considered were lessons learned from our experience during the GSP development phase with communication and engagement. Both the positives, what had gone well and what hadn't gone well. The fourth item was DWR's observations and their recommendations from their GSP approval document. Specifically, that was mostly recommended corrective action number 1. And then fifth was review of SGMA and State Water Code C&E plan requirements, just to refresh ourselves for what it said, and part of what led us to do that was the DWR recommended corrective actions made reference to those sections. So we reviewed the ones that we hadn't perhaps seen before, as well as all the ones that applied to the communication and engagement plan itself. So our conclusion, after looking at all those and what we had submitted previously and discussed, we concluded that modifications should be made to the C&E plan itself, and formally recommend that we document these changes through the draft plan that was sent out last week to the committee and is available to be discussed tonight. So what we asked for was a discussion tonight. I have Camille submit that she sent me late this afternoon with regards to what her thoughts were if she were not able to be present, and I can bring them up at the appropriate time. 95% of them were small, minor typos or preposition changes to make the document more smoothly readable. There were two major more major comments that I will talk about at the appropriate time. So with that discussion from individual members on the draft subcommittee plan that we presented, I will say that we've had this was a 2-month process or a month-and-a-half process after the last GA meeting where we presented the C&E plan, recommended C&E recommendations to the GA, not the plan recommendations, but C&E recommendations to the GA. And we put in probably just as a committee, the three of us, 30 hours each. It took a little bit of effort to really coordinate all of our thoughts, and the document represents our proposal to you, the committee, full committee. So I'll open the floor to individual member comments. Okay, Judy submitted comments. Do you want to talk about those, Judy?
Yes, actually, I wish that the plan that you had written was in fact what you just stated to us in your summary. I also have many small corrections in whatever you want to call it, syntax, grammar, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we anticipated that.
That I think will help to make the document clearer. I see no reason to push this through tonight, especially since we have quite a few members not here. They might want to discuss it further. Y'all, I think I've given you all, except for Renee, a copy of what I wrote. One of the major things that it's really a small thing in words, but it's a major thing in concept that I believe you left out, is I think the number one thing listed on the purpose of this document is to educate the public. And education is not the same as engagement or even communication, because it's a certain kind of communication. Excuse me. And I believe it should be listed under purpose. Before I get going, I would like to thank the committee members, West and David and Regina, for putting the time into this. I was part of the other subcommittee, and it's very time-consuming and at times frustrating to know just what to say and what not to say without writing a book. And I think y'all agree with me on that one. I don't know, you want me to read it to you? I think the background section is fairly good. I think it needs to have added to it that our basin 654, has been recognized as being in overdraft. Well, I wrote the words here, for over 50 years, and that the sole source of water is groundwater. And further in the document, you mention as a concern temporary employees. Well, not only temporary employees, but even long-term people that have lived here. When you ask them where their water comes from, they'll tell you it comes from the faucet. And to give you a little side illustration of that, the last time I ran for water district director, Don and I were walking a neighborhood, and when he knocked on the doors, he would ask people if they knew where their water came from. Most people didn't. This one guy answered the door and said, well, yeah, it comes from a well. And then he says, they're all over the place. And Don says, they are. And he says, yeah, and he walks out in his front yard and he points down the street. He says, they're all over there, that yellow thing down there. And of course he meant the fire hydrant. So education is the key, and telling people the facts up front is the key, that all of our water is groundwater. I have found that even some people who should know better misinterpreted the amount of water and the amount of water rights as being water, and for the $6.4 million that was brought up a couple of months ago at the GA. Again, on page 3, I went through this page by page. On page 3, I think that the word education again needs to be added. On page 4, the GA, the GSA, it's not an agency, it's an authority. And an agency is something that the people of a given area elect to have, and they elect their board members. We have an authority that was formed, as you know, by a joint powers agreement. And so that needs to be changed. And the part in here at the bottom paragraph I added it, part of it for some of your education. I think, you know, what is on page 4, you list you list the city, the water district, and so on. They're all public agencies, so you can say that at the top. The voting members of the GA board are public agencies. They include and then list them. The non-voting members and list them. And you can, I told you how to smooth it out a little bit with words. In this part of the document, you forgot both Kern County and the Indian Wells Valley Water District. So they need to be added as non-voting members. Let's see. On page 4, I believe the remaining 2 paragraphs are too long and can be summarized. There's no need to repeat that part of it that's in the original plan and it's in the GSP plan because they're already there in those plans. And in fact, while this plan is to be read by the public, it is also a plan for the board. And so they already know all that stuff. Let's see. Oh, page 5, desired outcomes. It's up to you, the committee, but maybe the word results would be better. And again, number 1 needs to have public education. Guess I'm too close. Under B, concerns and challenges. Items 2 through 7 are social issues. And you've combined them with communication issues. And throughout this document, you have listed DACs and SDACs, and what is the other one? Economic disadvantaged communities. And I wondered why you did that, because we're talking about communicating with people, and we're talking about communicating with them regarding the water situation and the GA. And that all applies to everyone, not just those groups. Some of those groups are already represented by, for instance, the Water District and in your current CSD.
Judy,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I got hung up on something here. Could we go back to,
I can go back because I'm not reading it.
I'm sorry, but on the first page, that last paragraph, when you talk about the voting and non-voting members,
Yes,
then you, continuing on the next page, says non-voting members of Water District and Kern County were omitted from the list. They need to be added. I don't know if that's appropriate because we are a voting member and it's identified on one of the bullets that the Water District is a voting member. I think
the
we're non-voting for the committees.
What this refers to is the PAC Committee. They're non-voting members of the PAC Committee. I referred to page 4 of the document that was sent to us.
But isn't this talking about the authority itself, not the?
This is the authority decision-making process, so it's talking about the board.
Yeah.
Well, then
It talks about the PAC in an advisory role later, but this is the whole thing,
Page 4.
page 4. And this was the decision-making process that was
You're right.
something that we felt we had to beef up a little bit based on some of the comments and observations from DWR.
I apologize. I made a
No,
mistake.
that happens to all of us. We're human, Judy.
And I had to read it several times to make sure that I was making a valid point. That's okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I put it in the wrong place. It's confusing, and I think, you said you had to beef up page 4. Yeah, I mean, you had to beef up some of this stuff, but it can still be summarized because What you're talking about is something that has already happened. It happened in the GSP. And the important part of this document is to go forward with new ideas that are suggestions for the board,
The,
the suggestions for the staff. And
we beefed this up and we felt it was necessary per the comments that DWR made related to the implementation process and the engagement of the public in the further decision-making process that was involved in those management actions and projects and the new things that were going to come along, filling the data gaps, et cetera, and that the plan itself would change in that process. And that was all tied together with this decision-making process still is fully relevant during the implementation period of the GA. And once, let's suppose we're successful, we as a GA and the community are successful in getting into balance, they'll be managing that balance well into the future, and there'll be a decision-making process of the GA into the future that goes well beyond the GSP itself, or the implementation itself.
well, one thing I have at the end of my document that I'll bring up right now, that I think you need to have at the beginning of the document, probably before you start talking about the purpose in the introduction part, is you need to give verbiage to the lawsuits. Because there are lawsuits, half a dozen or something like that. And the big one, the comprehensive adjudication filed by the Water District last year, is the one that involves all the uses and users of water in this valley. And it is going to be the decision maker of who gets what and when and how. We can write these things down and make DWR happy, make ourselves happy, but the real decision is going to come from that lawsuit. And my understanding, if I understand it correctly, and Don, you can tell me I'm wrong again if I am, is that the previous lawsuits by Searles Valley Minerals, by Mojave Pistachios, and anyone else have been folded into that comprehensive adjudication. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe all lawsuits have been consolidated to go to one judge.
Well, I feel that that is such a important thing that it needs to be put in the communication plan because, well, you've been at the meeting and the GA meetings and heard the comments yourself, David, that it is in fact perhaps going to compromise some communications over the years as this lawsuit or set of lawsuits goes forward. And it needs to be acknowledged. I don't propose you put it in the plan itself, but you put it in either at the end or at the beginning I suggest at the beginning as an introduction so that whoever reads this document realizes that this is occurring.
Judy, there were two places where it's relevant to be included. I thought we had included it in both. It looks like one of the two, it had dropped out in one of our drafts. And that was first a general reference in the background section to the fact that there were lawsuits proceeding. The second one was with regards to how you deal with communications in the communications section in light of the existence of lawsuits that, as you phrase it, I'm summarizing your comments, that will limit some of the public disclosure comments that can in fact be made with regards to the situation. But
Right.
overall, I will say the adjudication will determine who has the water rights. It will, therefore, perhaps if they're different than the allocations that were talked about in the plan, there will necessitate a change to the GSP or whatever document that is assigned if there's a different agency or authority than the GA to carry it out. The plan still will move forward with those new water rights allotments that are assigned, the values that come out of that if and when it happens.
Right, well, in some adjudications in some areas, public agencies such as water districts have been denied groundwater. So who knows what will happen? It could be very draconian. And it takes so long to do it. I don't think we should worry too much about it because we probably won't be here.
No, I agree, Judy, and we've talked about this in a couple different ways before, and that, number one, the plan authorizes us and requires us to move forward with this timeline defined in the GSP to reach sustainability. And we
Right.
know adjudications can go on for up to 20 years. The one just south of us took 19 years, and it was just settled or just decided in the last few years. But we have an obligation, I think, we'll search for where that dropped out of the draft, you know, the mentioning it with regards to the fact that there is a public adjudication filed, yet there still is. We made sure it was near that section where we refer to the GSP approval and the authority to continue to operate to develop to implement the GSP plan itself, as well as the period of 1 year from the time it was submitted, where that authorization existed from the moment you submitted the plan. And we'll look back to make sure that we've in fact included it in that second discussion summary fashion about the impact on communications itself, potentially.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I thought it was in here, and you can see there were a couple other changes in rereading it, even after I sent it out last Friday. There were things that, wait a minute, for example, Camille corrected two things in there that I thought we had changed in a previous draft. So configuration control was perhaps difficult for us. I will say that we expected, this wasn't a smooth document. We knew it was going to have some of the syntax, grammar type stuff, but we thought it was good enough to get the thoughts in front of this group and get everybody's inputs. We thought it was getting close enough that it would constitute something that we could reach general agreement on, and then taking all the comments into account, come out with an adjusted document, perhaps if needed, and it sounds like it's going to be needed, for the next Policy Advisory Committee meeting in a smoother form for the final approval.
Good. I'm glad you're saying that. I like hearing it
Yeah,
because.
there's an additional factor that may come in, and I'll say it here since we're on the topic of completing this review. There have been recent discussions between staffs regarding the fact that the stakeholder review period for the facilitation, the public facilitation by DWR, conducted by Stantec, being the contractor to do that, is complete, and their the survey that they sent out to members of the public all over and agencies all over the valley also completed last week, and that there would be a reporting out of that report with some recommended paths forward. And what's relevant to this discussion about the communication and engagement plan is it will likely include some recommendations related to C&E. So much like the DWR recommended actions, in fact, when they finally were clearly understood, this committee review of the document led us to make some of these changes that are in here, that there might be something substantive in that recommendation from the facilitators moving forward that we again take into account. So that, I was informed of that, I got off the phone about an hour before this meeting. So it's quite probable that we were going to need to at least open up the review again one more month. It's estimated that report out may in fact occur within the month, but there would be another opportunity to look at the plan. However, with 1 hour before this meeting, I chose not to cancel it, that our time would be best served by getting engaged. Some of your inputs are good, Camille's inputs are good, some of hers. The other members I expect to weigh in during this process to get us closer to closure. And I think we can have a pretty smooth document ready next month, and then to take into account any additional comments that come in from that recommended facilitation, recommendations out of the facilitation for at least to consider.
Okay, that's fine. If you like, I'm sticking my neck out here, but if you like, I would come to one of your subcommittee meetings and go through this with you if you want.
Well,
If
so
you
far,
don't
I want you to continue to share it with the whole committee.
Well, I've
And
given it to them all in writing, like I said, except
I know.
Renee.
But go through it, and we'll
okay.
see what the committee thinks.
Well, I don't even remember where I was. Anyway, we were on page 4. I think some of these things are too long and can be written in such a way that it would be shorter. The business, page 4, forgive me. These last 3 paragraphs, I think can be summarized in such a way as to read smoother. And that's what I said. I could write it out for you and give it to you if you want. If you don't, that's fine. Oh yeah, I did say something about results. Oh, part B on page 5. This page combines social issues and communication issues. And social issues are really not something for the board to deal with. I realize that there are people with disabilities. I have a few of my own. And, but it's up to the individual to deal with that. And you have things, I don't know if it's on page 5 or not, but you have things like provide the ability for the people who are hard of hearing, and you go into all these other things. Regular boards don't have that. The city doesn't have that, I don't think, and neither does the water district. I don't know about the county. I haven't been to a county meeting in a couple of 3 years. This needs to deal with communications. And we've all talked about this before. You know, there's those old trite sayings our mothers told us, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Well, the same holds true for giving people information, doesn't it? We can present it to them, but it's up to them to take the initiative to read it, have someone read it to them, whatever the method is, to get them educated on the subject. I don't have this down here in so many words. I have it down here a little bit. It's about later on where you give detailed ways for the board to do some of these various things. I think they need to be broad topics. And one thing I put in here that I don't think you had in there is I think staff, and in a way staff has, I'm disappointed that Carol isn't here tonight. Is she?
She just got on.
Oh, okay. Hi, Carol. Yeah, one of my disabilities is my failing eyesight.
Hi, Judy. No, I've been here since about
Oh,
5 after.
okay. You've already started with methods that this committee already brought up about communication. And as an old campaigner for a water board, which I was on for about 17 years, and had the privilege, and I say it that way, I had the privilege of serving on a committee while on the water board that was an offshoot of the Bureau of Reclamation study whereby the three major pumpers, the Navy, the Water District, and Searles Valley Minerals' predecessor, pooled money and put on what I think was probably the most professional information conference on xeriscape that this valley has ever seen. And it was spearheaded, the campaign part of it was spearheaded by a young man who is unfortunately no longer with us. He's passed away. He worked on the base. His name was Stephen Cooper. And he taught me how you do an ad campaign. And it worked. It was astounding. You would not have believed it because some of you lived here, but I don't know that you came. We had professional speakers right here in this chamber. We had workshops in the Kerr-McGee Center. It took all day. We had hundreds, if not thousands of people. And this was in the early 90s when people weren't talking about water shortage. They weren't talking about xeriscape. Some of them didn't know what that meant. And it started this community thinking, and it was something that was drastically needed. And I know that you are a very smart lady, and while I know April is going to be very occupied for a bit, she also is a very smart lady, and I'm sure you can start and figure out a communications plan, what you should do first, how you should do it. You need to do it just like you would do kind of a shopping list for a party and a budget, with a budget. You plan what you're going to do. You look at how much it's going to cost. You bring it to the board. You say, okay, this is what we should do, but we only have enough money to do number 1, 2, and 3. What do you think? And I think while hiring a communications and engagement director, I think you called him, David, is a nice idea. I don't think that the GA has the money to do that right now. And after hearing how much 750 acre feet of water rights, not water, is going to cost, I don't think the GA is going to have money for that person for quite some time. So I see this as something the two of you are going to have to get your heads together to do. But it can be done, and it can be done in little pieces. And perhaps that needs to be conveyed in this document.
Yeah, the document doesn't specify that the communication director is a separate individual that's not on the staff now. It implies that there's a clear identification of a communications director role needed, and that person has all the additional responsibilities. We would not recommend that it be the GM simultaneously, but it does not say that it can't be,
Well,
as written.
it's a task, it's not,
It has to be done. The
you have to
recommendation.
do it in bits.
Yeah, this was a recommendation of the full policy committee out of our last meeting. And there are certain functions that we agreed would be much better, especially during the implementation phase, if the GA had someone responsible for integrating and coordinating overall all these pieces of communications needed. Carol has found a mid-year total of funding to take on this task, so they're funding the task, and that implied to me that there was an annual budget set of tasking that would be required at an annual level that they would look at next year when they got a better idea of what it would take to fulfill this level of tasking and some of the various levels that we've given them in here, because both in our recommendations at the last GA meeting and some of the things that are put in here don't define the absolute detail or scope, but they capture the flavor of what kind of things are needed to be in there. We were sensitive and we included those thoughts about, not in the plan, but in our recommendations to the Groundwater Authority about our concern over budget and what these might require. But we left that to them, that you need to do this communications plan. You need to manage integrated communications with the projects and management actions in the implementation process, the integrated schedule that captures many of the things that we have all been somewhat frustrated with communications-wise and status-wise, that's all integrated. That's a big picture subject for a communications director role. It could be Carol's, or it could be the general manager. I don't think it's most effective that way, but that's a personal opinion.
Right, well, obviously, while you have listed these, you haven't stated them in what we think the most important order is, but we have talked about this publicly at this meeting. We've talked about it in subcommittee meetings. We've talked about it at the GA meeting, and Carol has acknowledged it, and that is, well, in the old days when, I see him clearly and I can't remember his name, the captain that was first here from the Navy.
Longbottom.
Yeah, oh, he wasn't captain either, he was
Commander.
commander. Longbottom, yes. He was very strong in pushing what he called the POAM. And those people who are here who worked for the Department of Defense know what that is. But it is basically, you call it an integrated management plan, I believe. Obviously, that is something that needs to be started immediately, not just for the staff, but for the board and for the public. It's public money that is being used, even if it's a grant or money from Proposition 1, for instance. It's public money and needs to be tracked. So that's my thought on that part. And again, I'm concerned that you have mixed social issues with communication issues, and I think that needs to be re-examined. Oh, your chart on page 7? Yeah, oh no, it starts here on
7,
Page 7, what do I say about that?
yes.
Says, I understand the intent of the chart, but it needs to be reworked. Most of the categories that are listed, for instance, are under the purview of the water district. I don't quite understand this chart unless you meant for the chart to be ways to reach a certain population of people. In that case, it sort of should say that.
Yeah, and perhaps we struggle a little bit with this chart also.
I know you met during the summer and people had summer vacations and kids home from school and stuff like that. But I do think this chart needs to be re-examined.
Yeah, but let me clarify a little bit what it took to get me to understand this chart. And I think you're right about perhaps it requires a sentence or two to explain what it is. It is just what you said. It's how to reach those people, groups to reach, but it also was focused on the different process or outcomes, process and outcomes you're trying to achieve with certain target audiences versus others. And that was a piece of it. And it was, a couple people mentioned this out of the Santa Cruz Basin Plan as perhaps a clearer depiction in some way of the water uses. But this was where we had some changes that didn't track from multiple meetings that we've had. And this, I wasn't personally wedded to this chart.
Okay.
So if it requires, obviously, if you didn't get it either, it requires more explanation or.
I understood the intent.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, somebody's going to read this and they're going to not have a clue here.
Yeah.
And one of the things a communication plan needs to really be able to do is to
You got it.
communicate.
Yep, we couldn't polish all this before we
Yeah.
sent it to you, and that's it's
Okay.
good comments. But you'll note some of the big differences are in how the right-hand column, the engagement process. Some of them are collaborate, some of them are involved, and some of them are get support from, et cetera. But
Right.
that needs to be much more clear about what do these groupings mean.
And I know you used portions as was recommended from other plans, but I'll remind you, we sure aren't Santa Cruz.
Yeah, that's why I
Either in
said.
culture or climate.
Yep, no, that was why, if you'll note, they're listed under Regina, most of the comments, but that was because she was doing the editing to the document. Most of those were West and myself and Regina, and what we were trying to capture is by saying, as I said in this case, it was from the Santa Cruz Basin Plan, and the implication there was individual members had liked this section, but tailored or
Yeah.
I can't remember the word I used there, and it's not visible on the document copy I have.
You wanted it
Tailored, it was tailored for our valley. There were a lot of other things in this chart in Santa Cruz's that were taken out, or agencies put in where they didn't have agencies, like the Naval Air Weapons Station, China Lake, for example, and some of those concerns. So we did try to tailor it, and this comment about tailoring what we saw in good pieces in other plans that we thought we should replicate, that tailoring comment is relevant to all of them. We took the idea from those plans and looked at it from our communities, our valleys, our basin perspective, and said, okay, how can we make this meaningful to our group?
The other thing I have on the same chart, but it's on page 8, is you have integrated water management. There is an organization, Don Sadiba knows about it. The RCD belongs to it. It no longer attends. My understanding of the integrated water management is it started as a plan. I don't know what its real title is now. Their CEO came and spoke to the GA one time. Her name is Holly Alpers. I don't want to keep not facing you, Wes.
It's hard not to do with these mics.
My understanding of this organization is it's been set up to mostly deal with really small communities. One of the things they did not too long includes Mono and Inyo County, and it's really Mono and Inyo County, and we're sort of attached to it because this area voted to join it. Am I wrong there or what? You tell about it. You're on the board. I mean,
No,
you're the manager.
We felt that we aligned more with Mono County than with the Lancaster-Palmdale area. That was the reason why the Water District joined Mono. And we have benefited from it. Through the Mono IRWIMP, we were able to get that Cash for Grass grant from Prop 84.
Okay. But they do mostly deal with
They
smaller
do.
communities. I think they put in a new sewer system for the Colville School District.
A lot of the tribes and, as you said, the smaller
Yeah.
communities that have problems with, they've been doing things like replacing fire hydrants, essential infrastructure projects, essentially. And we understand that, we contribute each year to their administrative costs.
We do also.
But the members that are benefiting most are those that are disadvantaged communities that really have a need. Their infrastructure's falling apart and they need support.
Right, and they're mostly really small communities that are isolated.
Yeah, and we interpreted that from the original Santa Cruz plan, the tailoring of it. In fact, one of those changes that I mentioned didn't get in this final draft was the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board. It was those water resource agencies for our valley that were relevant. So the counties play a role. EKCRD, that correction for county typo also was in one of those previous versions. Flood agencies, and perhaps we couldn't think of at the time a particular tribe in our basin that played a role in water management itself. Is there one, Don? And this was specifically in this area, we were going to look to you for comment.
Yeah, I think there's a Shoshone.
Is it the Paiute Shoshone tribe in Timbishaw?
I believe so, but if John Kirsty was here, he could probably answer that better than I could.
Yeah,
They deal
and the
with that.
bishop candidates were the Bishop tribe and the Lone Pine also. Those were the ones, and by the way, they were the same ones that Camille suggested for this section.
I think the BLM actually works with 5 different tribes, and they're generally north of here. Also going out towards Kernville.
But are they in the basin?
No.
And that was one of the discussions we had. Well, are they in the basin or are they relevant to us? Because as you mentioned, we share more in common with them. Is there some value to that? So perhaps being more inclusive is important to being less inclusive.
I don't think we have any flood agencies in this basin either.
Yeah, we didn't, well, again, we were a 3-person committee and we said, we don't know what those are.
And if this is supposed to be us on the bottom, we need some more words.
Yes, that's the one that the mod didn't get in. It was in a version of comments.
I can believe it. I have brought up that perhaps we should shorten our name, but nobody knows what to.
Well, you have to add at least 2 words to it, but yes.
And by the way, just for your information, the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District was formed in 1958. It is older than the city of Ridgecrest, a little bit newer than the Water District.
It's not quite as old as I am. Okay, keep going, Judy.
We won't go there. Okay. Oh, where is that? I missed it.
You're on your last page.
Yeah, but I missed the flow chart.
Yeah, the float, well, yes.
I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, we called it
It needs some revision, just to say it shortly. Oh, I do have it. It's up here on your flow chart. Again, you need the word education in outcomes. And under methods, I don't think it's here. You have mentioned it. and that's
education.
Informal meetings.
Is education an outcome or a means to an outcome?
That's a means to an outcome,
Yeah,
isn't it?
we focused this purposely, and this is a good discussion to have. We came up with 3 of them because maximum, we expected, what do you want to have happen if the GA is successful, which is the final one you see on the list here, is that the Valley reaches full sustainability through implementation of the GSP. And the 2 sub-ones to that, in one sense, are maximum public awareness and engagement, which I would argue also increased credibility and public trust. The underpinnings for that are education. And so they are not an outcome as much. You want to achieve something from your communications. And again, these are specific to the communications plan. The top level objective is that allows the GA to be successful because we said it in many places, or a couple places in particular in here, that the magnitude of the solution required to deal with the magnitude of the problem in the basin is such that we've got to have the majority and as close as we can get to all stakeholders agreeing and supporting and working towards that objective in the valley. And so to do that, we have to have maximum public awareness and engagement, and we have to have increased credibility and public trust from where we sit today with the public. And then we can reach full sustainability through the implementation of the GSP. At one point, there might have only been one outcome listed right here. You know, for the implementation phase of the communication engagement plan, or of the GSP, for the GSP implementation phase, what's the desired outcome? A successful execution of reaching sustainability in the valley. And from a communication standpoint, it was max public awareness and engagement and involvement in the process. And to do that, we needed increased capability and public trust. And I personally think education underpins a lot of that.
Absolutely. And some of my final comments, I am really concerned about the use of social media. As a matter of fact, I sent both West and David I sent them the ability to look up the article at the Bakersfield, California a few days ago. It was an Associated Press article about social media and the misinformation that is so abundant on, in particular, the government, be it local, state, or federal. And the fact that that the Associated Press was appalled with what has happened with social media, I thought was something to pay attention to. And I know Don has said that at the Water District they can do it, but it's a real concern. And in fact, it's a real way to take this transparency and trust and turn it around 180 degrees from where you want it to be. And
Can I interrupt here, Julie? When we, as government, don't speak up and I add that counter voice or that be the bellwether that others get to dance around and, you know, make their misstatements, then the public has nobody to look at to know if it's true. They'll just listen to the loudest voice on the internet. And so I really do believe that, you know, the GA does need to have some presence to be able to present the facts. And I think Regina said it pretty well when she said, you know, she moderates several groups. And there are different ways you can leave comments off and just present information with links back to the GA's website, things like that to help people to find the right information, to educate them. I really believe that the government has to say its piece, because otherwise, in a vacuum, people will make up their own story.
but they're going to anyway.
Yes, but we need to not let them not let the rest of the people think that there is no other opinion or fact.
And the majority of the younger population today, not the majority, but the majority does use social media. There are many of them that's their only source of information. And a push, and we recommended, this committee recommended a two-phase, or it was a three-step, but it's a two-piece approach to this that involves a push of information that is validated and accurate and stored on the website and referred back to all your interactions with social media will always refer them back to the factual documents that are located and centrally located and trusted and public release cleared on your website. And then the second was a foray into two-way communication, which can be controlled. It has limits that you can put at 4 or 5 different scalable levels to control the rabbit hole narrative that takes place on that particular social media function that you can't, and you're not going to be able to control it on all the other Facebook pages and whatnot that somebody else controls. But you've got to have, if I'm a young person, that's the only way I find, or if I find it the most convenient for me to go out, I'm going to look for something in social media that is the voice of the government. And if I have that reach out that I'm seeing that refers me back to something that the GA does control, I think that's how you reach them. I'm right with you, Judy, on the cesspool that exists, and I'm not shy about calling it a cesspool in social media.
Well, I have 2 comments. Isn't that how Mr. Trump got in trouble when he was president, always pushing his social media buttons? And I can agree with a one-way communication whereby the person, whatever you do you call in? I don't even know what you do. And gets the GA web page, social media page that says, GA board meeting, such and such a day, such and such a time, or whatever the most important thing is that can be put on there without a comment. If you want to make a comment, we suggest you do X, Y, and Z. When you start going back and forth, that's when you're going to get into trouble. Again, it goes back to responsibility. The people that are adults have a responsibility as citizens or even visitors to know what's going on in their community. It's their responsibility to find it out. It's not a governing board's responsibility to hand it to them on a velvet cushion on a silver platter. And I think, quite frankly, that that is what's wrong with a lot of the government today, is somehow that hasn't been taught to our children or grandchildren. I'm sorry to say. But these people have a responsibility to find out what's going on or pay the consequences.
Our unfortunate part is that the younger generation are all looking at social media and not looking at anything else. But I'll digress back. Tom, thank you. Thank you for what you just said. I have concern about social media too. However, I think we need to do what you said, suggested, what everybody talked. I think it needs to be done. See what happens. Will it help? Don't know.
Well, and we recommended a phased process.
Yes,
It
exactly,
would- and
exactly.
if it's not successful, you stop and you go back
That's
to your
exactly.
push only. And one of the specific examples that helped turn me around on this, Judy, and Wes to a certain degree, and I'll let him speak after this, is in the case where you were talking about a person submitting comments. If you enabled comments could be made, the moderator can select that the comment doesn't go public until it's been reviewed. And it might not even ever make the light of day if it's, a cesspool comment. And so usually the comments will be requesting information, or where do I find this, or how do I know that's true? And you refer them back to all, as we said in our recommendation to the GA last month, in the detailed recommendations, all references will be back to validated public release data on the website. Wes, comments?
Yeah, you talk to folks, and there are an awful lot of people that you talk to that are seriously concerned about the water, and they're angry, and you spend a few minutes talking with them, and they don't have the total picture. They don't know what's going on, and they're angry. And they're, in some cases, I think they have their favorite website that's not the GA, or maybe social media, and that's where they're getting the information, and it's made them angry. And I think these are well-intentioned people, yet most of them, I think, are trying to find information. And so I want to reiterate what I heard David say, and what we talked about is initially, let's make it a push. Okay, if someone's serious about information and they're responsible citizens, like Judy said, that they will find that information being pushed. The idea of then engaging a dialogue with those people or taking comments is something we're saying, look, let's not do that immediately. That's a phase 2 that we would approach very cautiously and be prepared to back away from. So I think that we need to get out there in the fray. Well, I maybe shouldn't use that language. Let's be the high point for information that's out there for people who will go looking for it. And that's why I'm in favor of it, of doing the social media as an information push, and with the website being the real authority that people can go to and be referenced to that. And that's why I like the idea. And I think there are responsible people that are angry for the wrong reasons, and they need to be able to find the accurate information. They may still be angry, but it's based on what's going on and not what they found on some rogue website or rogue social media posting.
This communications plan is just that. It's a plan. I suggest you just have phase 1 and see how it works. This is all subject to change depending on who can do it, how much it costs, and how well it works.
Now, and remember, this is any plan that we agree on overall to submit and forward is just that. It's an advisor, it's what we're recommending to the GA. As we well know of, they have the ability to accept or reject any or all or pieces of it, which I would expect there may be some of that. But they have the opportunity, and we tried to write this so that it would give them some discretion, and if we haven't written it that way, if it isn't read that way, we can correct it.
Dave, I was going to say, I think that table that Judy referenced, and it's, I think what's important about that table is it lays out the method that we'll use to engage with certain groups of people, like with the general public, generally be an inform. But with groups that have more investment or vested interest, you know, we may do, you know, educate and collaborate, you know, two ways across the table. And I really think that that's a good way to show the program, you know, how we're recommending that the board set up their communications, because, you know, when you're a member of the public and you're just looking for information, we can educate you. That's no problem. It's when you want to ask questions, who's gonna take you under their wing and explain to you the history of the world, you know, with IWV water, and you know that could be any one of the stakeholders, you know, could give you their perspective on how things have evolved. And so I think if we could continue that table, I think it's good. Don't take it out. Maybe wordsmith it or define what collaborate is, you know, things like that. That because there's kind of like three categories. I think it's educate, inform, and collaborate. I don't remember the exact terms used, but if you just define those, then you can look at the table and say, well, I'm a member of the public. I'm just going to basically get education. But if I wanted more, well, maybe I go find one of the stakeholders and engage with them, and then maybe, you know, if they're representative of my group, or I could ask them to represent my interest, then you could get that forwarded. Because I think there's an expectation when people come to the GA meeting, they want all their questions answered, and the board just doesn't have the time, or it's high risk for them to answer the questions, especially when, you know, they've got their lawyer sitting here, and a lot of times the lawyer answers, and I think that's frustrating to people to hear the legalese. They want, you know, straight shooting, and they're probably going to get that through the secondary means of representation.
That's why it's important to have that little group of sentences about the lawsuit up front, because people need to know, not only the general public, but the board members and the staff, that actually predicates every single thing that can be said at a board meeting.
That's a good point. A lot of people don't think in those terms, because how many people are actively engaged in lawsuits, or you know, walk around asking people engaged in lawsuits what they think about that lawsuit, right?
Well, technically, we all are now,
Yeah,
every one of us individually. Okay, do we have any other committee members before we go to the public?
yeah, go to the public and then I'll come back.
Other committee inputs, comments? Did you
I
want
have some questions.
to? Yeah,
What
yes,
is-
Renee.
Okay, what is phase one that you're talking about when you're doing social media outreach?
That was that was in the recommendations that the detailed recommendations that we briefed out, we agreed to at the last PAC meeting and briefed out at the GA meeting.
But what does it involve? Is it just, you're saying one-way communication? Is
It's a
that
put,
phase
it's a
one?
communication push. So you're putting out there information as simple as the next meeting. It could also be, you're pushing out, here's this month's integrated master plan. integrated master schedule. It could be any document or notification to the public. It's just a one-way communication push. It's a blast. It's the equivalent of something in the newspaper. Then two-way is where you get a blast and a response, perhaps. And then you can go beyond that into more of a blast response or not.
Okay, my question is, if you go with the social media and you go beyond just the blast or one-way communication where you're trying to inform the public of some important discussion or meeting or workshop or something like that, then you're going to have to hire someone to do this social media monitoring all the time. And to me, that's going to be, and you can't have some volunteers doing it. You need a professional that's on top of it all the time, monitoring it, 12 hours a day, 290 days a year, minus vacations and weekends and stuff. I just think it's an expense. I don't think the GA will be able to afford someone to do social media if you go beyond the phase one.
And that may in
And
fact be true.
I just think it'd be better to piggyback off of established social media sites that already exist through the county or the city or some other organization, because if you look at the other communication and engagement plans, like I believe it was Salinas Valley and Santa Cruz, they didn't state in their communication and engagement plan that they were having their own social media websites. They piggybacked off their city, county, water district, or other organizations that allowed them to put announcements on their Facebook page. And to me, that would be the most economical, safe way to do it. And then you don't have to hire someone and then get engaged back and forth and all that. And you're completing the phase one. I mean, I don't understand why we have to have all our own social media sites when there's other established ones that we could use. That would be one of my comments. And then my other question is, why do we have to put the adjudication in the communications and engagement plan? I mean, to me, this is a methodology plan to try to show people how we're supposed to communicate to the public, basically. I don't see why we have to give them updates on lawsuits and things like that.
We don't, Renee, but we have to, we don't have to give them the updates on the lawsuit progress or status, although there may be a time that that's really appropriate. And I don't think that's what we were proposing. We were saying, let's make sure it's in there, and this was in our general recommendation last time, noting that there is an adjudication that's going to ultimately determine water rights in the valley, and therefore potentially impact the plan. And B, where it comes in regarding communication is that the existence of a lawsuit of that nature is that it somewhat constrains your options as an individual party or the groundwater authority itself about ongoing things that relate to the litigation. So it makes communications appear less transparent. You're warning them of that. That's an existing fact that does have a direct link to your ability to fully communicate with the public. Other thoughts, Renee?
Well, in general, I liked what the subcommittee put together. My only thing is I'm hoping that they can get more specific in all the outreach methods and get more specific about who they're communicating to. I still think it's good to have a communications list there in case they, whether it's our general manager or someone that is hired temporarily to be a communications director, they would have a reference list of specific organizations, et cetera, and people to contact whenever there's like, you want to send out some kind of notice or anything. I still think more specific methods, outreach needs to be put into the,
Yeah, that was something that we intended to add as an appendix and a reference to it in the body of it. We had some of that in our original plan that required a lot of updates. We didn't get to it. I would agree with you that it's probably necessary.
I do believe we referenced the list, though, and what we just put out in the document you're reviewing. We referenced the existence of such a list,
Yes.
but we did not attach it or edit it.
We didn't have time to do all that in the
Okay.
time available.
Right, and
As long-
that's a list that will always change.
It will, but it captures also the types of organizations that
Right,
exist.
that's what needs to be listed, is the types of organizations, not necessarily the specific ones.
well, I don't know, my thing is, if this GA ever hires a communications director, they're going to be from someone outside and they won't be familiar. And if someone coming in to work for the GA, they need to have a handy list, because when you come to this valley, you don't know all the entities you need to contact to get communications to. And to me, it's handy to have that. I agree with having it as, you said, an appendix list. I agree with doing that.
Thank you. Okay, we've heard from all our members, I think. Let's open it up for public comment in the room first.
Microphone is alive. I'm Don Decker. I'm a member of the TAC, and I'm your sole public member here tonight. You actually have an operational, a functional, your first phase that you've been talking about already exists. And it's not mentioned in your report at all. It's the two websites that Stetson Engineers supports. One is it's the GSA website, and the other is a GSP website that's much more technical. It has the data from individual wells through the years and that kind of thing. That already exists, and it's paid for, it's functional. If it's not adequate, there needs to be some effort put to improvement. I think I myself have made suggestions to them about their GSP website that have been taken and immediately put in place. I think you're struggling here with, in a way, something that's a non-problem. That is, there already is a phase one. It's just a matter of keystrokes. You know, it's a web-based site, just like Facebook is. Fewer keystrokes will get you there, actually, way fewer. So I think in terms of what you're trying to do here, working up your plan, a lot has been put into Facebook, into that part, and the struggle here tonight, talking about the minuses and the difficulties. The phase one already exists. That's what I have for you.
Thanks, Don. I would say when we've talked about social media, we consider that the sources of exchange of information as opposed to a website, which is somewhat static. Yes, it is phase one, but it was not considered as the all-complete Phase 1. It is the central repository, that was our recommendation, of accurate data. And the reach out to specific, well-used social media methods such as Facebook page to point people to the GA website, the places where the newspapers, the digital newspaper, the digital news that they use, the folks that are social media users, where they go. So it's Instagram, it's a couple of those that would engage those folks that aren't going to go out on their own and find the website very easily, and in its current state, it doesn't have a lot of the things that we're recommending overall. But so we engage, and you can get huge audiences there compared to what websites historically get, but you point them back to it. So that's the level of engagement. The public, there are portions of the public that are only there. They don't go searching for individual websites unless they already know they're there or and have been pointed to them from other sources. We all know folks during the last 5 years, as recently as a week ago, that walk into this chamber or other meetings that we have on the subject and say, I've never heard of this before. What are you doing with water in the valley? And that same thing exists, some of those folks are only social media type folks. So you're missing, they're there, and we are missing making a connection with them.
That's true, except those folks that are just tuned in to Facebook are missing something which is trivial to get a hold of. That is the websites from Stetson, for example. You can just, a single click on Google gets you there in an instant.
If you know the GSP website exists. My point is, an example to you, and I agree with you, Don, how many of the public that we're talking about, many of them that do know the GA website's there, don't know the GSP website and the stuff that's available on it. You want to get their attention where they live on Facebook or whatever other source it is and let them know it's there.
Carol?
It's a question of how far you go. It's back to what I think Judy talked about earlier. That is, there really is a responsibility the public has for their own education. You can't force them to take on something that they really don't want. The GSP website absolutely needs to be referenced on the other website. They need to be both interconnected in that sense, and they will be. But I say that, I'm not a Stetson person, but I'm convinced that they understand what they're supposed to be doing, and they are modifying both of those websites all the time. So it's not like they're static, and they are actually being upgraded and referenced, used, all the time. They're not static at all. So I think
The websites could certainly be put on the postcards that Carol talked about sending out at the last GA meeting.
Yep.
they should
All
always-
references to media should point back to the websites.
Yes, and
Yeah,
the
that's what we're doing.
websites need to be right at the top of the page.
We agree with you. That was one of the recommendations.
Yeah, the problem is if someone is seriously and responsibly interested in learning and educating themselves, the websites may not be the first thing that pops up. It'll be something else. And if the website does pop up, it's not going to be inviting to a person who wants to inform themselves. It needs to have that introductory portal, or whatever the right language is, that gives the overview, that points you into greater detail within the various websites. And that, I think, is a big part of where we want to see the websites go. And it might just be wrapping the information that exists there already, and particularly the GSP, with introductory material that will lead a responsible citizen to find the information they need.
One last thing. What you bring up, West, is excellent information and advice, and it's exactly what the domestic well owners has proposed over and over again. In fact, many of the pages already exist. It isn't Facebook, however, it's just a web page.
Thank you, Don.
I do look at it, but I don't look at it for GSP information. Does the Water District website refer a user to the GA website?
I don't honestly know. I'll have to look.
Well, that would be a good place to put it.
I think you do in a couple specific instances, like the fees. But I'm not, I recall seeing that, I'm not sure if it was just the GA or the Water District website.
Honestly, I don't never look there for the GSA, but I can check and see.
Well, it certainly would be considering the fees that the Water District customers pay to the GA, it would certainly be an appropriate thing to put on, I would think. But of course, that's up to you. As an example, it ought to also be on the city's website to refer to the GA website. But again, I don't.
And that's kind of along the lines of what Renee was referring to, and I think that's a good idea. We think that's a good idea. I would ask, do we have any public comment from the virtual land?
I can confirm there is a link to the IWVGA Groundwater Authority website
Okay.
on the district's webpage.
And we did not have any more public comment.
Thank you.
Any more board discussion?
I didn't get a chance to. We got stuck on that social media thing, and I started there. Looking through the draft, knowing it was a draft, so I didn't critique it down to wordsmithing and all that. But I felt you committee, had captured all of the salient points that had been brought up that were to be included in all of that. So I thought it was all pretty clear, you know. Obviously, it was not, like I said, a smooth draft, and there's going to be typos and all that sort of thing, and better ways to say things. You can always wordsmith a document. I don't care what you do, always. But I thought you covered everything, you captured, I thought, everything, so I thought it looked pretty good, you know, as far as I'm concerned. But sometimes I'm not picky enough, so.
Well, I walked away with the same feeling that, you know, we've had various committees, and Lyle and Judy and I have been on them, and we've come up with ideas, fact sheets, making the website stand out more prominently. And the only thing that's really new is social media, I think. Everything else, you know, the idea that the website should be the main central repository of information that could be referenced to from social media or other places, an awful lot of that were the things that we talked about, we came up with.
Yeah.
And so I think the essence of what led up to this was captured.
Yeah.
And maybe it can be communicated better, I'm sure it can. The social media is really the new thing. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. I got one more too, that you talked about communications director. Well, yeah, sure, we know that GA can't afford one of them, but how about somebody needs a responsibility for it, because that's what happened to the original communications plan. You know, 2018, we did that, it got filed, and there it sat. So what we need, whether it's a collateral duty to some staff, I don't know. Carol's people, I don't know. You know, but how about assign communications direct as a collateral duty to somebody else that's already there and make them responsible to make sure that some of these things happen, which didn't happen with the first one.
But isn't that something the board should do?
Well, of course it is. However, enough said.
And that's exactly what we did, both in our recommendations for communication engagement outside of the plan. Our last report recommended the establishment and listed the responsibilities of this individual, whether it's a new person or a person's additional task or whatever. And I see Regina has joined us. Regina, other than the fact that we eliminated the social media section from it before you got here, do you have any comments? And I'm kidding, obviously.
I was about to say, you better be kidding.
Well, you
No,
weren't here to defend it.
I know. I'm sorry. I got trapped in a final presentation that went over not so great.
Regina, can you stay close to the mic? You're coming in and out a little bit.
Oh, it also might be my internet. I've only caught the last like 15 minutes of the conversation. So, but I'm proud of the draft. So, I mean, any recommendations or changes, I'm open to them as always, because we knew going in that it wasn't going to be perfect.
Nope, and we've got a few that we've talked about for quite a while here. So a couple more comments. I would like to ask Carol, from what you've heard, your perspective as general manager and dealing with a plan that is along the lines of what you saw submitted tonight and the subsequent comments from the members and public that are here. Your observations, please. You're on mute if you're talking, Carol.
Oh, I was waiting to hear you because I lost your audio there for a minute, so I didn't really hear what you said, Dave. Although at the risk of asking you to repeat yourself, I'm going to assume that maybe you're you're looking for my feedback on the plan you've been discussing.
Yeah, the plan and what you've heard tonight, please.
Yeah. Yes. No, I really like everything I've been hearing. I agree with just about everything I've heard. You're absolutely right. All of you, our resources are limited, but that doesn't mean that we can't be doing what we need to do, and that is recognizing and implementing our C&E plan. And I think what you're recommending is excellent. Yes, with our limited resources, and I think as Judy suggested too, we'll probably pick and choose, especially at first. We'll try to go for low hanging fruit. We'll try to do most bang for our buck first, which is what we're working on now, and probably over the next through the end of the year, trying to get some good activities going that provide some good education and really try to inform the community about what we're doing, what's going on with our water supply, what efforts we're making to bring in supplemental water, what strides we've made, especially with bringing in some grant money. We're also trying to get the word out about the shallow well mitigation program because we're starting to see some impacts locally. So, I mean, absolutely, those are the things that we're trying to get out there. As far as having a person on staff accountable, yeah, absolutely. There's no question that needs to be done because we can't implement it if we don't have someone taking responsibility for it. Whether we can hire someone who's dedicated to that, yeah, probably not. Our resources probably won't allow that. That said, though, it's something that I'm picking up in terms of responsibility more and more, and actually even doing some of the work myself just because I have a little background there. And also talking to some of the folks at RGS, the entity that sends us out to work for the GA, about bringing on some folks that we can utilize as needed, which really saves money because they work in the same fashion we do. We only bill the hours that we work, and there's no big retainer fees, there's no contracts, things like that. It's just what staff is available to help out. So I do think that we're going to be seeing a lot of that, especially the next 3 months. We're going to see more coming out of it. I like the fact that you have a plan that's going to be going to the board here pretty soon. Sounds like maybe next month. And that'll give me a much firmer foundation to start, putting together some plans because we have our budget coming up. And I do want to expand on what we already have authorization for and build a budget for next year and coming years for us to continue with the strides we're making and try to get this plan put out there. So I really like what you folks have done. You've done a lot of hard work. You've put a lot of thought into it, and I think we're gonna make some really good improvements in our outreach to the community with it.
Thank you, Carol.
I have something else.
Okay.
I neglected to mention that I do not think pages 13, 14, and 15 are appropriate here. They are not dealing with communications, a communication plan. They are, in fact, more of a directive to board and staff. And so I would like the committee to look at, it doesn't have a letter, it says communication guidelines and responsibilities.
Yeah, it's big D, you can't see it
I can't see it.
in the black and white, or yours is black and gray. So it's kind of blacked out.
So I would like you to look at that again because I think it's overstepping the bounds of a communication plan. Our job is to create the plan, not tell the board and staff how to do it.
Yeah, this section had a lot of discussion within our subcommittee. It was something that several folks thought was appropriate from the Salinas Valley Plan and from lessons learned, because we've had incidents with GA staff, with GA board members, with PAC committee members, saying things appropriately or not appropriately at certain times. And there was a thought that since other plans have included a section like this, and we had some experiences that maybe said it was necessary, maybe we should include it. And I personally think it's a little too detailed, but I
think it's a
resonated
lot
with
too
some.
detailed, and you're sure not gonna, you're not going to control the GA or the GA board, nor should we even think about doing that.
Well, this
The
is their.
GA board needs to, or the staff hired RGS services. The GA board members are appointed by the various agencies that they sit on. They are the three local people are elected. You have John Vallejo, who sits in for Matt Kingsley, supervisor for the southern area of Inyo County, and you have Tim Itmeyer, who sits in for Paul Cook, who is a supervisor for, I'm not sure, I know it's the Searles Valley area, but what else he is supervisor of, I have no idea. This is inappropriate.
Yeah, it is the GA's document that they can self-police it. It can be a recommendation or not.
I don't think it should be in a communications and engagement
Do we
plan
have thoughts
document.
from other members?
I saw that, and I'm not sure how I feel about it right at the moment. But yeah, I can see where, yeah, I know where it came from. I remember that one too. So, yeah, I would be happy with it either in or out. Would be okay.
Yeah, as you know, David, I was a little bit doubtful of whether it makes sense. It sounds like it's something the lawyers should do.
Yeah.
Well,
Rather
then we
not
know,
us,
then
but-
we know we won't go there with lawyers, right?
Right. But, I can't disagree with any of the content of it. But I was a little concerned whether it's our responsibility or not, or whether it's a
So-
C&E plan responsibility.
Regina or Renee, your thoughts on this section?
I was gonna let Renee go first if she
Well,
had a
I have to reread it because I didn't look at it from that angle. So I'll have to send in an opinion or something.
Regina?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where the concerns are. You know, like you said, Dave, we had immense discussion regarding that section, and I mean, I'll definitely defend it because although it's coming across as a directive, and I guess technically it kind of is, but it isn't. I think the spirit more so is just the layout guidelines of, you know, how you would communicate with the public, because there have been instances of miscommunications, and
There
you know,
will always be instances of miscommunication between two people.
well, that's what the CNE plan is supposed to attempt to mitigate, is, you know, so that we have fewer of these incidents going forward, where the community can get behind the GSP, understand what's going on, and be an active participant and community member, rather than, you know, having the wrong information out there, or have somebody misspeak because they weren't sure what, you know, what to actually say, or what the procedure would be. So, you know, with some of that stuff, it could probably be rolled up, but my opinion on it is that section is, you know, kind of important. It's at the back as a guideline so that everybody's on the same page.
If you include this section in your final plan, I will have to oppose it.
Okay, let me summarize where I think we are overall, and get to some level of closure. I think what I've heard tonight from everybody is generally you like the draft with some of the comments made, taking particular exceptions and corrections needed to certain pieces of it or sections of it. We have 2 written submissions to go on from individuals, Camille and Judy. We've tentatively said that the path forward, given the comments we've heard and the potential for the outbrief of the facilitation recommendations that might also include C&E plan impacts, that we would send this back to the committee to consider all the comments and flavors we've heard tonight, to smooth the draft and come back next month with something that represents what we feel is the majority of most of the comments that we've heard from the committee, the full committee, and the public tonight. So that's what I see the task in front of us and in front of the subcommittee. The subject for the next PAC meeting then would be the C&E plan review of that draft. Pending whatever, we're going to know a lot more about the timing of the outbrief and decision process that the DWR is moving with the facilitation. But Carol, as before you came on, I think it was before you came on, I had a discussion with a member of staff about an hour before this meeting, actually it was less than an hour, before this meeting, disclosing to me that there had been some discussion with the lead facilitator that they were getting ready to do an outbrief in some venue of their process and next steps, and the outbrief of one of the recommendations may involve communications and engagement efforts. And so that may affect, again, it may not, because we've been pretty comprehensive and yet wide-looking, reaching in terms of our recommendations. But I think we'd rather, before we go final with our recommendation, we have the opportunity at the same time that we get our document ready out of the subcommittee next month, we would have some insight as to whether there's going to be something that might change it from DWR's facilitation. Now, that said, I'm going to say we acknowledged back when this process started, and DWR actually referenced it, is this communication and engagement plan is going to be a living document. And it's going to change, and perhaps it requires periodic review. So we don't want to drag this process on too long. So if we don't have something that we're hearing from regarding the facilitation in the immediate future, you know, if we can reach closure at a next meeting, we should get to closure.
What does Camille have to say? You've never.
Oh,
you
well,
never told.
I input many of her comments. I just didn't attribute them to Camille. As I said, the majority of hers were with regards to small, you know, syntax, grammar, making it read more smoothly. There were two things that arose to the substantive comments that a few of you have introduced tonight. One of them was, her concern was that she read the document as prohibiting the GA would be prohibiting itself from the general manager doing the communications director role.
One could read it that way, yes.
Yeah, and on the other hand, some of us read that to mean it had to be separate. So I found that interesting, but that's human nature. So what do you want to read in it? It doesn't preclude it. In other words, and perhaps we can make that language more clear that you have an option. So that's one. The second one was in that last section that we talked about, and this I was going to bring back to the committee, and thank you for reminding me, Judy. It was the section on board directors and their ability to comment in public, and it was saying they always had to represent the GA. And in fact, when they're speaking representing their individual agencies, they're legally required to represent their individual agencies. So there's much more nuance to that than was depicted in in this document. Should we move forward along that lines, it would require some adjustment.
You know, there will always be miscommunication and misunderstanding because we're all people. But we do live in the United States, and one of the things in our Constitution is freedom of speech. And if one listens, one can make an evaluation of people by the things that they say, and it doesn't have to be written as a rule. You just, the way it is.
So what I've outlined is the subcommittee is going to go off one more time and take into account the comments that we've heard tonight, both written and otherwise, and come up with a attempted final draft for submission and discussion and review and approval at our September PAC meeting. Are we all in agreement on that?
Yeah, could you send us Camille's comments?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
I didn't have time to send them out, nor would you all have had time to read them just before this.
Absolutely not.
And I was hoping she was gonna make it here tonight, so. And obviously, there's a lot of good typo corrections and things, which we knew were coming that she'll have. So we've had PAC member comments, we've had public comments, we've had comments from the general manager. I think we have the path forward. Is there anything else on this subject before we move forward?
I just wanted to mention something. Hello?
Yes, Renee.
I wanted to thank the subcommittee for their work because to me, this brings us up to a much higher level of having a more professionally done communications and engagement plan that's on par with the communications and engagement plans that we reviewed from the other groundwater authorities.
Thank you, Renee.
And then secondly, I want to say thank you for putting in the decision-making process into our communications and engagement plan, because I think not only did the state want us probably to put that in, but I think a lot of people in this valley, if they hear about the GA, and they don't even know how it's governed. So I think that's a good thing that you added.
Thank you. And it's also called out in the water code.
Okay, right. And then, thirdly, I quickly, while you guys were talking, I reviewed those last few pages of the CM plan. I'm not against having that in there, because I can see that either you need to have it in the communications engagement plan about who's allowed to communicate what, who has the authority to do what, like be a spokesperson or whatever, because that's what it's basically touching on. But maybe there needs to be some kind of statement everybody has to sign when they take a position on the policy advisory committee or technical advisor committee, or when you're a board member of the groundwater authority, that you have to abide by certain communication rules so that misinformation isn't put out there. That's my comment. And so I'm not against you keeping that in there, but if there was another way we could put that in some other document the GA has, or like I said, if everybody had to sign a statement that they would abide by these communication standards. That's my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yep, the subcommittee will take, again, all these comments into consideration. And when we bring it back, I expect a more robust part of our discussion when we get down to it is this section and whether we keep it in with whatever the latest version of it is. I will say that when we did this section, it was about 9 o'clock at night that night. And so that's one of the reasons we missed what Camille pointed out. So we'll take a close look at it going next time.
Yeah, just one last comment. You know, it occurred to me that in that last section, it might be a very simple statement that there needs to be guidelines. There's a need for guidelines, and we recommend that the Groundwater Authority develop those guidelines and maybe not try to spell them out ourselves. That might be a fallback position. Because there's certainly, I think everybody agrees there is a need. I think the question,
there isn't
hang on, I think the question in some people's minds is it our responsibility in the C&E plan to state the rules or to state the need for an existence of rules?
Well, when I was on the water board had, the water district had a director's policy handbook. I don't know if they still do. And I think city council has one. And obviously, the two members that come from the two other counties are employees of those counties, and you're telling them how to behave. You are stepping out of bounds. I'll repeat it again. It's stepping out of bounds. Do congressmen and senators sign a paper that they are not going to miscommunicate? That they are going to behave themselves? I don't think so.
We'll take all that into consideration and bring it back for discussion.
I just want to say one thing to answer Judy's question. I know the House of Representatives, and I'm sure the US Senate, they have ethics committees.
You have to take ethics training as an
Ethics.
elected official or an appointed official. You have to take it through the California Special Districts Association. It's called ethics training. It's a workshop. You used to have to go to it. Now it's online. It's 2 hours long.
Yeah, we all did that, but we're going to go down a rabbit hole here
Yes,
for a
we are.
decision that we're going to make next time. So let the subcommittee work on this and bring us back, and we can have the discussion much more focused, perhaps. So with that, we'll move to the next item, member comments. And I'll begin with Tom.
Yeah, really, I don't have any new comments, but I look forward to reviewing the draft and giving you some final comments next month.
Don?
I'll echo Renee's comment about the complimenting the committee on the work that they did. I know that you put in a lot of effort into that. With regards to the Department of Water Resources Facilitation Services, update on that. Hopefully, most of you are aware that there was a survey put out to the public to participate. To the best of my knowledge, I believe 137 responses were received. And I've heard from Stantec, they are planning tentatively to have that second public workshop the week of October 3rd. I'm trying to work with the city IT department to confirm availability either Tuesday or Thursday of that week. So once we get that confirmed, we'll put a notice out. And the hope would be that the people that fill out that survey, as well as the ones that did the formal stakeholder assessment interviews, would be in attendance for that workshop.
Thank you. Lyle?
I had one other thought about that last section there. Isn't that what the state gigged us on for our communications plan and didn't give how to do it or something?
We'll have to check.
That was my thought, so, okay.
I don't think so, but
There was,
we can talk
there was
about
something,
that.
yeah, there was something that, that was not included in our plan that the state thought was missing, and it was in some of the other plans, and it was sort of how to apply it or how to do it or whatever.
Well,
So,
yeah, we'll have to
figure it out.
We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go to virtual land out there. Regina, comments?
None off the top of my head. I mean, I look forward to working with you and Wes. It's been a good experience, and I think we made a lot of progress. So with everything that, all the comments and everything, the ones that I've caught, I'll have to go back through and rewatch the video for the beginning ones. But I think we're on, hopefully next meeting, we have a much stronger draft, and I'm sure that we will.
Thank you. Regina, Renee, comments?
I just want to say thanks again to the subcommittee for an excellent job.
Thank you. West?
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with Dave and Gina, and moved a lot of ones and zeros around, kind of rewriting everything. And so look forward to continuing.
Judy?
Yes, I'd like you to know that the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District is putting on a plant talk on the third Saturday, I believe it's the third Saturday of September, and we are again having a plant sale. The sale will be the last Saturday in October, and the list should be coming out soon on our website. This year, while we'll have plants from Mountain States Nursery, we will be having plants that are native plants to the Mojave Desert. This is the first time we have had those.
Is there any price break that they're offering or a parts
Price
of?
break? Heck no.
Well, I'm just saying, or is there funds that go into supporting EKCRD or?
The EKCRCD is a special district that includes the Indian Wells Valley and Fremont Valley, which is the valley south of here. And as I said earlier, it was formed in 1958 by a vote of the people.
So there's no funds that go from this event that go to them?
The funds that the RCD receives, they receive a small portion of Kern County tax dollars, and they use their money to educate the public on resource conservation. And since we have this severe water problem here in our valley and have had for many years, the RCD has concentrated on water conservation, and we are doing so by having a plant sale we charge for the plants, but we usually don't really make any money on it. And this year is a real, last year we had a speaker who was the horticulturist for the Joshua Tree Native Preserve. I don't know if that's the correct name, but you know what I mean. Unfortunately, she won't be the speaker this year, but she has grown the plants from seed. So look for a list, and if you're interested, some of the more common ones that we will have for sale are bladder pod. And if you ever went up to Short Canyon, that band of plants that had the yellow flowers on them that all got burned up were bladder pods.
Thanks, Judy. Those of us that are considering converting to a more native plant, drought-tolerant, xeriscape type format in our yards or property, this is an opportunity. They're bringing in a vendor that we don't have access to locally. That's what.
Both vendors are non-local. Mountain
Yeah.
States Nursery is in Glendale, Arizona, and that's where the plants we have had for the last several years have come from. We are getting some from them. Not all of them are native to the desert, to our desert. That particular nursery, which from the pictures I've seen is absolutely enormous. The people that owned it sold it, and the new people sold the property and are moving their nursery, I presume, somewhere else in the area. Don't know all those details, but we got some plants from them at a really good price. So we have some plants from them, including desert willow. And if you don't know what a desert willow is, it is a native to the Mojave Desert. It has a beautiful sort of snapdragon-ish looking flower on it that's two-tone magenta and pink. And while it mostly blooms in the springtime, if you withhold water for a while and then water it again, it will bloom again. And the bladder pod, to go back to them, they are a plant that goes mostly dormant in the summertime, but then they bloom. We have them on our property, and a couple of years ago, when we did have a little rain, they bloomed from Halloween to Valentine's Day. And they have a yellow flower.
Thank you. Good opportunity anyway for things that aren't available easily locally. For my final comments, I will say, it's been a pleasure tonight. It was a pleasure for the subcommittee to work on this, sometimes more than others. We work well together again, so we're kind of pleased to go back and do what hopefully is the final tweaking on this and bringing it back to the committee for the final decision. So that's what's going to be on our agenda next month. Look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you very much for the engagement from everyone tonight. That's what we needed. That's what we have in here. The one thing I will note to you is that we are down to 8 members of the PAC.
Oh, but we're much better than an attack.
8 voting members of the PAC. That's an even number. We've got to have 5 to make a quorum at any meeting from this point. So it's imperative that we are judicious about when we meet and that we try to maintain a quorum and get to our objective. To that end, we have a task. We've already talked a couple times about the TAC members who we can recommend to the GA itself a member representing our stakeholders that we represent. We also have the ability to encourage other folks that are interested in filling some of the open seats on the PAC, because we would like to see both the PAC and the TAC in healthy states moving forward, because there's a lot of important things that are going to happen during the GSP implementation
But the
process.
The TAC needs to have people who have an education in the technical areas. And you aren't stressing that, and I think it is very important to stress that.
Yeah, I've actually read the requirements at the last couple meetings, so, yes, Judy's right. You have to have, you don't have to have that for the policy committee,
Right.
but you do have to have the social abilities to engage and listen to all sides and take into account the fact that, yes, you are in fact representing your stakeholders, but B, you also have a responsibility to try to achieve consensus and recognize there are interests from the other members also. And you, as a body, we have a responsibility to try to achieve consensus.
Yes.
So with that, I think we're adjourned for the evening. Thank you very much.